welcome back to Friend Crush. I'm your host, Amber Akilla. This is my podcast where I talk about stuff and things, cute, chaotic, and critical thinking. We are in the business of being hot and having fun. You can follow me on Instagram, TikTok, Spotify, SoundCloud at Amber Akilla. The meme page for this podcast is friend.crush on Instagram. Sign up for the newsletter so you can get updates on the podcast. If you become a paid subscriber, then you get access to my voice memo series where I share like more chaotic, unhinged thoughts and reply to questions from listeners. And also just like, sharing things that are happening like as they occur. So would love to have you there. Also, you can cop merch for the podcast on the website, friendcrush.club. I'm going to be doing like intermittent drops when I can, sorting out logistics, etc., etc. I'm so excited for today's episode of Boy Confessions. It's so funny how these guys always come on like so sure about what they want to say and who they are, and I feel like they always realize something, or I'm always like kind of challenging what they think in the process of our conversations, and in the same way that I learn a lot about their perspective, the male psyche, etc. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Let me know what you think, and without further ado, Boy Confessions with Christopher. Welcome to the podcast, Christopher. Thank you for being on today's episode of Boy Confessions. Christopher is not Christopher's real name, just for everyone, in case you want to start doing some FBI shit. But how are you?
I'm good. Tired, but good.
Do you want to share like just a little bit about you, your age, location, background?
Yeah, I just turned 30, which has led to me, I think, reflecting a lot, even though it's just a number and age.
We can talk about that a bit more in a second.
I was born in Perth and I live in Perth currently, but I moved around a lot as a kid, basically because of my dad's job. We just followed him around to different places. I used to work in data science, or some people call it AI, but yeah, data science as like a consultant, and then now I work in like web app development for resource companies and stuff.
What's your current relationship status?
I'm single. Yeah.
Are you like actively dating or intentionally single or like messing around or?
No, like I'm on dating apps, like kind of half using them, but I'm only really interested if like I'm not really interested in someone who just wants to hook up, I guess. Like I kind of just date and see where it goes, but I'm looking for something longer term.
What were you going to say before?
I was just going to talk about my interests, like even though I work in like tech and work with a lot of people who are just very like singly minded around that. Like I've had a fairly like tumultuous like journey to like this career position. Like I kind of thought like for a while I was going to do like journalism, and then like just studying like commerce for a bit, and kind of didn't really settle on anything, and then just kind of ended up in this job. So
Did you study what you're currently like working, the field that you're currently working in?
Yeah, computer science, but then I dropped out like, after my second year. Got an internship through my dad. And
Oh, Nepo baby.
And then they were just like, "You just want to keep working here?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I just stopped studying and just kept working.
So you've been working in tech and then now you're on leave as a result of realizing that you're like burnt out. So you haven't quit your job. So you could go back to your job after this, but you haven't decided if you're going to go back yet.
I will go back because I need money. So
Yeah. How long is your leave?
I'm taking 3 weeks off because I haven't gone on leave in like 3 years, apart from like Christmas break, which I don't really count as a break because that's like with family and it's just draining. It's fun, but like you're not resting. So last year I was like in like a mid-level management position, and then both people above me, my mentor and my immediate boss, they both resigned. 2 other people in my team resigned, and it was just myself and 2 others in like our team. And the CEO was like, "Yeah, we need you to like run everything for a while we like look for people." I was like, okay.
God.
I got paid more for it, but
That's good.
and I had to like hire people and like train them up and like teach them like not train like as in skill, but like what we do. And that was like very draining, like that whole experience. And then I moved back to a technical role, and then because I'd been in management for a while, I felt like rusty and not like up to par. So I think I was just overworking for like months. Not even necessarily like in hours, but sometimes like I would start at like 9, but work till like 6 or 7 when the sun is down, and then maybe go to the gym, and just this constant cycle of like leaving house, coming back to house, and it's like dark and there's like nothing to do, and I just watch Succession or something and then go to bed. And then I felt really burnt out. I lost the will to like do any work. I talked to my psychologist, and she's like, yeah, you should just take leave and stay at home, and don't tell people that are draining you that you're on leave, because otherwise they'll ask for more of your energy.
Clever.
Which is a good idea.
Yeah, because you mentioned before, like you thought that if you just went on holiday, it would be better, but you realize that you actually just need to like do nothing.
I think that's like what a lot of people think. They think like a holiday is like a healing experience, especially if you are overworked or stressed about something at home. Like holidays can be quite hectic. It depends what type of person you are, but you've paid all this money to be there. You want to be there, and then you can't just laze around all day. I mean, you can. I feel like a lot of people will feel kind of guilty if they did that. Travel to some amazing destination or country, and you're just sitting in your hotel room for the whole week. So I realized that wasn't going to be the thing that would make me feel better.
You mentioned like that you thought carefully about pitching yourself to be on this episode. What do you think were your like motivations to do this? Because I appreciate the effort that you took into writing a short message with context. Because that's how low the bar is these days, you know, like the guys that I specified like non-creative industry, and I had creative industry guys pitching themselves. No, not even like why they should be on it, just like, what about me? And I'm like, well, you fucking work in music, so no.
I guess, yeah, I fit into the filter that you said, no creative people. And I was like, I could actually end up on this thing. So like, how do I increase my chances? Lots of people may reply. And I think I know from like how you are on like, well, you present yourself on Instagram. If someone presents like a shit or low quality reply, like you probably would have like screenshotted it and been like, look at this idiot. And I was like, I did not want to be that person, so I just had it like open for like a minute.
But you were like interested in discussing the like general topics.
At the moment, like the value for me is like, I'll download this episode and keep it, and when I'm like 50, I can like listen to what my answers were to this
30-year-old
stuff.
self.
Yeah, and I don't think that's something that you can try and do it yourself, but I think it's more interesting when someone else is prompting and asking questions.
What do you think are like the main influences in how you understand masculinity and like your own masculinity? Or do you have what are your thoughts around this concept? I'm curious.
In terms of influences, like, because my dad worked in, and this is like a very like Perth thing, but he worked in like mining. Wasn't that he was away like a lot, but like definitely predominantly raised by my mum. So I think, I feel like I have I was, especially as a child, like a little bit more, like most of my friends were like girls until I was about like 12, 13. Like more of like a feminine influence, I guess, in that way. And my dad even quite a like shy and reserved person, not your typical like macho, you know, that type of view of a man. So I guess that's influenced it a lot. And then people I've looked up to have been usually like musical artists and stuff like that. So those type of role models versus, you know, sports people and stuff like that.
What kind of musicians have you looked up to in your lifetime?
Not as much like right now, but it's like a very generic answer. But Frank Ocean, like for a while, like I just I liked his music a lot, but I just liked how he seemed to be living his life, like kind of quiet but confident, had style, kind of was just doing whatever he wanted for a while. He released like a book like with his album, and a lot of it had just like what he was doing between albums.
The Boys Don't Cry magazine?
Yeah, I'm kind of jealous of someone who can just explore different types of work or art for like years and just like see what happens. Like, not that I would like pursue art. Having the like money and time to just do that and not having any other pressure on you is it seems just like ideal.
Do you feel like you're understanding of masculinity has been challenged by people around you, or like the society, the bubble in which you've lived in, or you feel like relatively comfortable in how you
No,
present yourself or how you.
I think definitely challenged. Probably till like early 20s when I maybe understood that it was fairly normal to not fit into that, just typical kind of silent, strong, not even silent, but
Was there like a turning point that you can think of, or do you think it was like a gradual sort of understanding?
I think gradual. Probably just traveling more,
Yeah.
meeting more people. Definitely leaving high school.
Did you go to an all boys school or a co ed?
I went to a boys' school. Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds about right.
Even though people had varying experiences there, like there's some parts of it that I did appreciate. Like, it was a fairly prestigious boys' school, but in year 10, I was like basically like failing school. Like I wasn't doing well, and it was really because of just like I wasn't studying. And in comparison to some of my friends who went to like schools which, if you weren't performing at a certain level before your second last year, year 11, they just like
Oh, you get kicked
they
out.
just they just dump you onto just subjects that aren't going to count towards their ranking. Um, Whereas they, yeah, allowed me to basically change like all my subjects to like just try and succeed in things I was interested in. Had compulsory sport, which I guess like some people may disagree with, but it was good to have that defined like balance. Like you just cannot study or you cannot worry about anything like during this time because you're just doing something else.
Yeah, I have like a general understanding of like the private boys' school. I wouldn't say experience because, like, obviously, but I experienced it like secondhand as a girl around that environment. And then knowing guys that have come out of that and then how they do or don't see how it's influenced who they are, I think is interesting. You know, like I know a guy who basically said that he doesn't think he had a critical thought until he was in his 20s because he just never questioned the environment that he was in when he was in high school, because for him he was like very high achieving, he was like the golden boy of his year, and then that obviously created like a very insular environment for him. And then graduating from high school and going to university and traveling more was like a really big sort of created a very big shift in how he saw the world and his place in it. But then, you know, at times I see how he still very much is rooted or influenced in that sort of like very small high school bubble
No, absolutely. If you
experience.
spend enough time, like
Yeah.
surely it's going to influence you.
Yeah, especially in those like formative years, you know, it's very difficult to completely shift away from that. And it doesn't mean that, you know, that's like expected and natural. What about your like early sort of dating experiences? Are there any like significant experiences that you had, or significant experiences that have kind of like informed how you see dating now, or just anything that you want to like discuss?
Didn't date at all in high school. I probably would have liked to, but I think I have a sister. Like I had some friends that were girls, but just like, especially the transition from there to like university, I was like, not terrified, but I was like, oh, I have like no idea how to talk to like girls my age, or like
Yeah.
the experience of just regularly meeting and seeing girls because I was just in an all boys environment for so long.
Yeah, I didn't date at all in high school. Can be bothered.
Yeah, no. It was not many people, like really like maybe 10 to 15% of my year group. Maybe a bit more like right at the end, but that's okay. Significant experiences. Like some of my most significant ones, I wouldn't even say we didn't actually like even date. It was like,
Yeah, I was going to say, it doesn't have to be like duration or like official label, any sort of like romantic adjacent experience. Like maybe you didn't date, or you had like an ongoing crush, or like where your expectations don't meet reality, et cetera, like that kind of experience, or like situationship.
I guess like it's probably still like the most significant like heartbreak I had, and we didn't date. I went on like a Kentucky tour, which is a very Australian thing, at like 22, around Europe. I met her there, but I didn't really like talk to her much. I was like talking to other people. It becomes like very cliquey as well. And then like groups of us would catch up because there was so many Australians on these tours. Like you, like 80 or 90% of the tour is Australian. Yeah, I started talking to her and like we got on really well and we were like texting every day. I already probably had like by the time we were texting, I had like a crush on her. I don't think she had any feelings for me at this point. And I think we're both at like a stage in our lives where we're both in university, but it's like it kind of like we didn't have too much else to do, like that you could just text endlessly to someone else. Like
I
I could
hate that.
like I couldn't physically do that now because I have a job and like all these other things, but I guess I just had a lot of free time.
And she was also from Perth, like
No,
you,
she was from
or she
Brisbane.
was just Australian?
Yeah.
Okay. It became like a long distance texting thing,
Yeah,
or what?
primarily, mostly a friendship with like a little bit of flirting, maybe. But and I think eventually I was like, yeah, I like you, and she's like, okay, I don't really have the same feelings for you, but I like you as a friend, blah blah blah. Because she was also basically like one of my best friends at that point. I had trouble, even though the best thing for me at that point would have been to just disconnect, at least take time off for like months. I was just like, no, I'm healed after like 2 days. Like I'm fine.
Oh no.
And she's like, you sure?
Yeah.
They're like, okay. I'm just still texting.
It's fine, sobbing.
And also like because of this, like I was like just restricting myself from dating anyone in Perth because I'm just kind of had my
All
I,
your energy's like focused on her.
I think like later then maybe she started like subtly reciprocating feelings like months later. Like, it's hard to tell. And then we organized to like go on holiday together and like stay at the same hotel room and stuff. And then I got rejected again on holiday on
What?
the last day because I was like, and she was like crying. I think her reason at the time was like, I'm gonna lose you as a friend because I think at that point I said, okay, I'm gonna need like space for like. She's like, how long? Like a few weeks? I'm like, probably months, like maybe 6 months. She's like, 6 months. I can't stop talking to you 6 months. Then, like a few weeks later, when I was at home, she like sends me this big long text, like, "Oh, actually, I had feelings for you, but you know, I want you to move on. I want you to do this, blah blah blah." And then eventually, kind of just like petered out, and we don't talk to each other anymore. Prior to that, I still hadn't dated. It was really just like extended hookups or failed dates. Those are like my first experience of just feeling extremely heartbroken, and then like, it was compounded with I was talking to this person really like very often. I was probably kind of like emotionally dependent. Like if something shit had happened at work or whatever, I would talk to her about it.
It's like the first time that you'd been like emotionally invested in a relationship dynamic, like maybe in comparison to the girls that you'd like been casually hooking up with, you didn't have that same level of emotional intimacy.
Some of those girls I liked, but it would just end a lot quicker. If I told them I liked them, they'd be up to until that point, it'd be like, "Oh, sorry, I don't feel the same," and then it's like cut, like gone. Whereas this just there was a long time of just talking a long time, like about literally everything for becoming friends, like really good friends, and then yeah, that happening, and yeah, then it was like losing a basically a best friend and I guess a romantic interest at the same
No.
time.
Or what do you think you learnt from that experience? How it informed later dating experiences and dynamics? Like if I think about, for example, you saying that you guys were texting like all the time. I've been in situations with guys where they text you every day, but like they don't organize to meet up or they don't. It doesn't go any further than texting. And for me now, I'm just like I just like won't do that because I think it's a waste of time, and also I have a life in comparison to when I was at university and just like had all the free time in the world, was procrastinating and like not trying to do my degree.
Yeah. I guess the most obvious one is like, not that we were in a long distance relationship, but it'd be really hard for me to like entertain the idea of getting into a long distance relationship because I think, my opinion is anyway, like it puts a lot of pressure on the relationship, especially when you commit to meeting because there's all this like time apart and you're trying to fill like the void with like yeah texting or calling. Yeah, I think it just puts a lot of pressure and like expectation on when you do actually meet. Or I mean, I guess some people like, oh, we like plan to move to the same location within a year. But even then, I think like compared to a regular relationship where you're able to see that person as frequently as you want to, if they're both agreeing. For me, at least, I think it's just like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, especially starting with the distance. Like, oh, you've met once or you've met a few times and then you're separated and you're trying to like figure out a way to meet again. I think that's tough. I mean, I do have a friend who is like maybe an exception to that, living through a possible exception. But I think the difference is that they already knew each other and their families have already known each other for a really long time. So that creates like this connection between them that wouldn't exist if you just met someone like randomly. But yeah, exception doesn't negate the rule.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to that kind of thing.
Now, my friend met someone on Grindr, but by the time they'd matched and started talking, he'd already like left Perth, and they talked for like a few months. I think met up once or twice, and then after 3 months, he moved to Perth, and like they're living together and really happy. It's a very wholesome relationship. So
Oh my God.
it can happen. But yeah, I guess they did it.
Yeah, it can totally
They
happen.
actioned it like fairly quickly, and someone has to commit.
Yeah.
Like someone has to move.
If people are asking themselves if it's going to work, or like whether long distance is like a viable option for them, then it probably won't work, you know? Because like if it is going to work, both of you are already on the same page and there's no questions. You don't have doubts about it because you're like both committed to the situation. But when like one person's kind of like, oh, is long distance going to work? This person, blah, 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 then I think it's like, maybe that's not really what you want. Maybe what you really want is like to not be in a long distance relationship or to be in some other thing. How have your like recent dating experiences been? Or do you have any reflections on the dating scene in Perth or just dating narrative in general even? Like I'm so curious about if there is anything that guys are like consuming information wise or like perspectives, like thought leaders that men may or may not be following in regards to dating advice or dating content. Because I think women, at least women who maybe listen to my podcast, are consuming the female skewed version. I'm wondering if like guys look into that stuff or you just like out here vibing.
Well, at least my experience with like male friends is they tend to like if there's a problem they're having in life, they will just kind of Google everything, read forums. Like that's like a very me thing to do. If I find a new hobby, I'll go to like the depths of hell to find like every single piece of information on it. And then my perspective on that is like at some point it doesn't really matter. Like there's no like secret thing that's going to like
Yeah.
help you. Like I think that's what I used to think when I was younger. I was like, oh, if I discover like this thing, like this will work, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And you'd find like all these people with like amazing credentials, like academically or whatever. And there's like all this information available. But like a large part of it just seems down to like who you are as a person, who you're
Shooting
meeting.
your shot.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's like probably the most important thing is actually not being afraid. I don't know when I had that mind change, but I don't know if it was like ultimately a great thing because there was probably girls I could have just been friends with instead of trying to date them. I would just basically have the mindset of like the worst thing they can say is no and asking them more often. And then I would kind of like nearly, if I had the idea that I wanted to date them, I'd kind of nearly want to just like ask them just either no, like yes or no. Like I wanted that like definitive answer.
So your approach to dating is more like you meet a girl and you kind of get to know them in a platonic way, and then if feelings develop, you'll like confess your feelings before initiating like a romantic.
Oh no, I'll just ask them out on like a date, but I'll make it known that it's
Okay.
a date. Not
Okay.
that was a confusing thing for me for a while as well because I was like, I'm asking them out to coffee, but what do they think that means?
Yeah, because I think it's interesting. My observation is like in Australia, it's quite common to just go out for coffee, I feel, or like very casual dating initiation sort of vibes, you know, like at least, I mean, I have been asked out to dinner and stuff, but I feel like it's very casual, especially in Perth at least. It's like, oh, do you want to get coffee? Do you want to go to the beach? And then it's like the guy will decide whether he is interested in continuing from that. Or like you both kind of do a vibe check. But a lot of American, especially, dating advice or dating culture is very like, you need to be asked out to dinner. You need to be like invested in this interaction.
I've always found the dinner thing like a bit, I guess, strange from like where I brought up. Not that like, I think that's a completely reasonable like first date and it's nice, but just seems like ultra formal, especially if you don't know them that well. Like, because there's different types of dinners and different types of places. Like, you could pick somewhere that just has a more
casual. I guess it depends on how much you like them, but I also think that it's like difficult to gauge like what it is you really like about a person if you don't know them that well and you're like making that kind of investment. So I think, I don't know if that's like a hot take for me or an unpopular opinion, but I also think that in Australia it's very common for people to hook up first and then decide if they want to date. I don't know if you've like experienced that or had that
No, that's like
or like observe that?
it's like very common. Kind of like turns me off now. Like I don't know why. It's like I want to get to know them. Like I'm not. I also don't really find that type of sex very enjoyable with like a. Because sometimes it's like they will just come straight to your house. Like they've never met you. Either side, probably more so males, I'm sure. But um,
Oh, like from dating apps.
yeah. So yeah, and I guess being naturally like a more like shy, especially when dating apps first came out, like having the knowledge that you both like each other, supposedly like superficially or how you look, how having to even talk to them, like you're at that baseline already.
You're both on the dating
Yeah.
app. You've both matched. It's like that foundation. Yeah.
I think that made it a lot easier for me, and I just went on like a lot of dates, kind of to just get comfortable in that social situation. That'd be my first point of advice to anyone, really, is like obviously be safe, maybe do it during daytime hours, and like, but just like talk to through dating apps, a lot of
Yeah.
ways, just talk to people, even people maybe you don't think are your type or whatever. And then if you're comfortable in that social situation, then I think you can more easily show like your true self, or versus like maybe feeling a bit guarded or a bit nervous, like it can kind of be hard to express who you are.
So you feel like before it was like a little more difficult for you to feel comfortable meeting strangers or being able to like communicate, initiate communication.
If I met a girl, like, I don't know, at uni or something, like, even figuring out if she has a boyfriend or not, like, you can ask, but you don't want to ask, like, super early, because it's like, why is he asking me about my boyfriend? But eventually I figured out, like, questions to ask, but you can kind of just, like, get them to
What are your leading
reveal
questions
it.
that you ask women to gauge whether or not they're available?
I'll just make some passing comment about, like, someone else's boyfriend or girlfriend, and then just be like, oh, what does your partner do? Like, I'll just assume they have one and ask something about them. Then I'll get the answer like, I don't have a partner, or he or she does X. Probably a bit blunt, but I don't know. Yeah, after meeting them several times, I'd ask that. It's not like I just bump into them and first thing I say is,
So what's your boyfriend's coffee order?
yeah.
I'm not on dating apps, and I'm not anti-dating apps. Like, I'm critical of dating apps in terms of like people being on them and like not having a good time and then being confused about like why it's not good. It's like, okay, either you need to shift the way that you're on dating apps, or you need to be off them for a bit before you go back on them. Because I think like now it's like, it looks like it's super gamified. You have to pay for everything. It's like, don't waste your money, don't waste your time if you're not getting anything out of it. But I do think that there is still utility for dating apps, and especially in the way that you've described, for people who are more introverted and don't have opportunities to like be around a lot of people or meet a lot of people that easily and have that kind of like practice. I think it does help to talk to people on there and like meet up and just get used to like interacting
Yeah.
with people in a dating context. Because I think for me, like, I am definitely introverted at my core, but I think the reason why I'm like less, or I'm more comfortable speaking to guys, is because of DJing. Like, because I was in those male dominated spaces in like the sewer of society, the club. I think like, you know, that kind of forced me to learn how to just like communicate and navigate this like co-ed environment out of high school and into university in a way that I wouldn't have been able to if I didn't start DJing, because I would not be going to clubs if I wasn't working in them.
Yeah.
So either become a DJ or get on dating apps and practice communicating if you're like introverted and need practice just like engaging with the pool of people that you would maybe want to date.
It's a good example of like, I feel like old people, their advice is always like, oh, get a hobby or join a club. And like, to so many people, that advice makes like zero sense, you know? Like when you think of, especially the word hobby, just sounds so old. Like it sounds like crocheting or something. Like,
Yeah.
but like, I guess it became a job for you. Well, it probably pretty quickly did become a job, but that's like an example of an interest you had that led to you being able to meet a lot of people.
Whether or not they were the right people for me to be meeting is a different discussion, but I was still able to, you know, practice, or I was still, it was like a type of exposure therapy. And I do think that there's value in having a hobby or like an interest that is like genuine to you, and not even thinking about how it's like, oh, if I like do pottery, I'm going to meet my husband at pottery. It's like for example, I don't do pottery, but if I was going to give, I would say like, okay, I'm interested in pottery, I'm going to do pottery classes. Maybe I become friends with a girl at my pottery class, and then we start hanging out, and then through that I meet some guy that I could date. I think like a lot of the times people think way too like 1 + 1 = 2 when it comes to things like, oh, if I start DJing and like I'm exposed to more men, then I'm going to start dating a guy from the club. But it's like you might meet someone who then like there's so many different things. It's just like putting yourself in a new situation that opens up like more potential branches of things that you could be then exposed to. So that's just my little aside. And that's why I think it's important to like do the things that you're genuinely interested in. You never know like where it will lead you to, but like doing it is going to put you closer to whatever it is.
Absolutely.
You know, any other like dating sorts of dating culture observations that you've made recently? Do you think like the pandemic has affected dating culture in Perth at all, or like?
Didn't really experience the pandemic here properly, but I reckon a lot more people had babies. I think they're already dating, so like, well, they're already like married or whatever.
Oh yeah.
That was the most noticeable thing.
You mentioned when we first connected about doing this episode, like a lot of people around you that are your age are having children or like settling down. What are your like thoughts, feelings, reflections on that kind of observation? Because that is something that I observed as well when I was in Perth, but I was also like, bye. I don't want to live here anyway.
Yeah. It kind of led led to like my last breakup, but I feel like I view having a kid as like a absolutely like massive commitment. This is like a child that you're gonna parent. You're gonna massively affect them till at least they're probably like 20 something, probably for the, you know.
You're a parent for life.
Yeah.
Like once you're a parent for life.
Yeah, I'm kind of shocked by how casually people have kids, especially in like. I've heard the story of like people with a kind of rocky relationship and then having a kid to fix it. Like, I could not think of like a worse thing. Like you're just gonna like triple the amount of pressure you're putting on that relationship. I think reading like psychology books and stuff and reading about how much your childhood kind of shapes you and affects you made me kind of scared of that.
In terms of just going into it lightly, you know.
Yeah,
like
the last girl I was seeing, something happened that could have led to like a potential pregnancy, and then I was like, well, and then she was like it's fine, like if I have a baby, like you don't have to like look after it, like I'll just look after it. And I was like, what the fuck, like what do you mean, like why would I I would never run away. Like I'd basically just have to live with that person. Like that's how I would see it, because for the benefit of the child, or at least be like pretty involved.
Yeah, and also for like your own ability to take responsibility for like the things that you've participated in. You know, I think being able to say like, why is it not also something that you need to contribute to? If like, but obviously different people think differently about that kind of thing. Yeah,
it made me maybe reconsider. I guess basically if you're like having sex with someone, like you kind of have to be like especially as a guy, you have to understand that like this could result in a kid, like, and it's not that's your decision, like to do that. It's not just like for all the other reasons to have that.
How long were you with that partner for?
Like 4 months, not very long.
Did it make you think like, oh, would I want to parent a child?
Yeah, well, that was basically like the question, because like this had been raised, we had like quite different opinions, and then it was like, do I want to have a kid with this person that I've known for like 3 months?
Even though it's like hard to say at that stage, but it's like, okay, if that was like actually something that happened,
but I think that
you be able to.
I don't know. Do you think that's like a massive overreaction?
I don't think so.
I think it's just because of her answer. Like not her answer, but like she was like completely at peace with having a kid. Like if it happened.
I don't know. I think like different people want different things at different stages in their life, and like if you are intimate with someone, or like if in any capacity, like whether it's platonic or romantic or like work-wise or whatever, it takes time to reveal levels of compatibility with someone. Especially in romantic situations, it's like a lot of the times we are making assumptions, or we're like writing our own story in our mind about what our future with this person might be like because of like your hormonal response or whatever. I mean, I'm like reflecting on experiences that I've had where it's like I don't even know this person well enough for there to be any weight in like the story that I might just like randomly make up in my head about them, you know? And then through my actual interaction with them, you know, maybe they say certain things that lead my mind in certain directions, but then they do things that are completely contradictory to the direction they're trying to lead me in. So I think one of the hardest things to do is to like really take people's actions and have that be what determines your compatibility, not like the story that they may or may not tell you or that you may or may not be making up in your mind. So when people are talking about like children and the future and trying to decide like what they want out of a relationship or relationships in general, that does need to be considered if you take the responsibility of having a child seriously, because some people don't take it as seriously, or, you know, like I think that's important. I don't feel like people's attitude towards having children changes that radically. Like, I don't know.
Oh, like over time. I think a lot of people sit in the like maybe, like I'm like a maybe person, like technically. And then like the right random string of events happen, and all of a sudden they want like a baby. Once you have a baby, then also you know that's your baby, and like you're gonna have feelings. Like I think it usually like flows okay from then. Sometimes not.
This is a question that I get a lot. Like, people around me are having children, people around me are settling down, I feel like I'm behind, or like, should I be doing these things, blah, blah, blah. Like, did you kind of go through that when you saw a lot of people around you having kids? Or what are the like stages of realization that you might have gone through? Because I think it seems like you're like somewhat at peace with it, but maybe before it was like something that you thought about more.
It's probably made them seem like less scary to me, like having people I know and I knew them before they were parents, seeing them as parents now, and they're still able to be like their own person, and not be like completely consumed by parenthood. That experience of that past girl I was dating, or girlfriend, or whatever label, I think that kind of like I was already just that happened before like a lot of my friends were having kids, and then it's only really that's like last year, and then so my opinion's kind of been set from then.
Your opinion being that like you are unsure of whether you want to have kids, you feel like you need to be in the right sort of relationship and situation in order to make that commitment.
Yeah, it'd have to be someone I've been dating for like years and have a lot of trust in, and then I would kind of rethink it at that point.
But you don't feel like you need to be seeking that experience because people around you are
No.
already parents.
No.
Yeah.
No, it seems terrible. Like from a day to day, like it and also like, I kind of feel in general, I don't know why, but I feel like for my age, I feel like I'm like 3 to 4 years behind a lot of my friends who are the same age. My lifestyle and how I work like just does not fit in with that like at all. Like at the moment, like it would have to radically change. I feel like you need to at least like trend towards it. Like
Yeah.
I live in like a 1-bedroom apartment. It's like, where would a baby go? Like,
Yeah. So for the people that you know that are parents, you feel like it's sort of they were working towards becoming a parent, or you feel like it just like happened?
some of them, like, yeah, it was like trending in that direction, and they were even making jokes about like, I guess they weren't really jokes, like about as soon as we get married, I'm gonna have kids, and then they had kids.
Before 30, they were doing that.
Yeah, like 28, 29.
Wow. Can't relate.
My other friend who I've known since like I've been technically since I was like 7 years old, I did not know like at all, and although we're really close, sometimes he kind of withholds like these type of things for me. I first started getting suspicious because like he wanted to get a new car before he was like, yeah, I like hatchbacks, well, because they're really easy to park, blah blah blah. I have one now. I was like, okay. So I was like recommending him like small cars. Then all of a sudden he's like linking me like station wagons and like SUVs. I'm like, why are you looking at this type of car? And he's like, oh, my partner has like 2 dogs, so we need somewhere to put like the dogs need to fit in the car. I'm like, I'm pretty sure they can fit in like your car now, which is like tiny. They sit in the back seat. And he's like, yeah, we need more space. And then like months later, he's like, yeah, my partner's pregnant. I was like, oh. People at work like were even kind of saying like they thought because of his personality. Do you know like a stereotype of like a computer programmer, like very
Like introverted, quiet.
yeah, not to like
Yeah.
generalize, but sometimes autistic. Or like
You
autistic
okay?
seeming. Yeah, people at work were like, yeah, I expected like you to have a kid before, like this guy. Like they, no one could believe it. Like it was like the last guy, even though he's been in a relationship for like 10 years.
Yeah, because I feel like when I was stuck in Perth over the pandemic, I saw a lot of other people having children or like getting married. It did not push me to want that more.
No.
Personally, you know, I was like, wow, good for you guys. I'm good over here. Like, but yeah, it's interesting. But one thing that I did notice about myself was like when I really wasn't sure about what my future was going to entail as a result of being stuck in Perth and like whether I could make it back to Shanghai, I would just think like, well, worst comes to worst, I could just have a baby. And I think that's something that is very, I think it's just interesting, like the relationship that you can have with motherhood as a woman, even if it's not something that you actively want, just because it's like, I don't know, like you know that it's just going to give you something to do for a really long time if you don't know what you want to do. And I think that subconsciously for some women, it's like if you don't know what you want to do and you haven't yet mustered the courage to like figure out what it is, having a child with someone seems like a really easy way out, because you get a lot of attention when you're pregnant, you get a lot of attention when you first give birth. And I think that a lot of like postpartum depression can come from this come down, where like you've had all this attention, all this build up to having a kid, and now you actually have a kid and no one that was gassing you up is around to help you raise the child. Now it's like you and that baby, and if you're in like a shitty relationship, now you're probably parenting two people, one that you gave birth to and one that you didn't. That's just my personal observation, which is why for me, just having a kid for the sake of having a kid in order to fulfill some societal requirement or some like family expectation or some social circle expectation, it's like you could literally just get a hobby and that would probably fulfill you enough for you to then figure out what to do next.
It's weird because I've seen some of like your posts and you seem to like, it's weird how riled up people get about this particular issue. Like, and I'm assuming it's probably usually always like single men who are just, or girls as well. Like, they just seem really kind of upset by the idea that some people just don't want to have kids.
Yeah, like I just have other things to do until I decide that I want to have a child. I don't think that's a crime. I want the world to be a better place. I would hope that the next generation is like, you know, better than the last, or is more informed and given like the necessary resources earlier on than our generation. And I think part of that is recognizing the responsibility of raising children, not just like popping them out. Like if I was in the right situation, I wouldn't not do it. But I just feel like so far from what that situation could be or like needs to be. And then people being like, oh, well, you know, it's never really the right time, or like you'll figure it out. And I'm like, yeah, but I know like right now is really not the right time. You know, like there are times that are better that are like more conducive than others. You know, I'm not just out here like, oh, this is a great time for me to just, you know. And I think it's like weird that people are like, you'll just figure it out. I'm like, maybe I don't want to.
Yeah.
Like maybe I would like to be a little bit more prepared than I am right now. And I think the fact that I'm not going out of my way to prepare myself for it speaks to the level of preparation which I am at.
I feel like for me, career-wise, like it's only been like I have like a bit of like management experience. I'm not a junior anymore. Like I'm like been working for 7 years at this point, and I have some friends that like work in Europe, and some that like are from there, and really like now like seems like the time to go. Like if I was to move, I'm not in a relationship. I don't really have anything holding me here. And then like I kind of have this weird thought when still using dating apps. I was like, oh, if she's like, if this goes really well, then I will like stay. Like, well, I don't know why that's like my thought process, but like, I'm kind of like more willing to like, I guess try just to see like to go to see if there's a reason to stay. Like, but also like the like application and like visa process is just very long and laborious, so I've just procrastinated and not done it, even though I have like opportunity to do it. But
But it is something that you want to do, like to move to Europe or to spend more time there and see if it's like.
yeah, because I've visited a few times, and then I think it's easier when you have at least like one friend living, and he's like works in a similar industry, so like it would help with employment and stuff. And I feel like if I'm gonna move, the younger the better. Like when you're older, it's just more likely to have other arrangements or older parents even. I don't know, but
Where in Europe are you thinking?
because I work in tech, like Amsterdam has a lot. Berlin like has a decent amount, but like I liked it as a city. In Copenhagen as well, in Denmark. All of my family is from like the UK, but I do not want to live there. Like, it seems. I don't know what your thoughts are on. I actually don't mind London as a place to visit, but to live, like, it seems.
Not for me personally.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think like it's maybe human nature sometimes we're trying to like evade. I wouldn't say it's like personal responsibility, but it's like, oh, maybe if I meet a person, then I can like, that person can like absorb the load, or like me contributing to this like relationship is going to, it's easier for us to take a bet on the idea of someone or the idea of a relationship than it is to take a bet on ourselves, you know, because it's like because I don't have anyone to blame or like subconsciously like push responsibility onto if I'm like doing it for myself, you know, like if I stay for a relationship and the relationship doesn't work out, well then it's like, you know, both of us are at fault to a degree. Or you could just be like, it's them. But if you decide to do something like fully for yourself and it doesn't work out, then you're like, well, did I fuck it? But well, what I try to do is think that even if it doesn't go the way that I expect, at least I have knowledge for myself, and then I can like re-navigate from there.
The only other thing dating wise, I feel like I'm at odds with a lot of girls on is like the concept of the spark with someone. My approach like on a dating app is like if we've like messaged a bit on the first date, like I'm just trying to get a feel for who that person like is and talk to them. Like I can't remember the last time where I felt like in love with them. And like I think my experience is like sometimes I have seen it like develop over time. Like my sister like completely disagrees on that, and like a lot of girls I see online. Yeah, but when on a date there's no spark, like goodbye.
Oh.
You don't find that as like something you've like encountered like online, or not you personally, but like other people? And I kind of understand, because it's like you don't want to invest a bunch of time into someone, right, but you have no attraction to them, or
Yeah. Well, this is what I think like the issue with dating apps can be. If you could just go back on a dating app and just see if the next person you have a spark with, like it's like there's too many options. The illusion of so many options being available to you makes people like not invest on, because for me, like I'm not on dating apps, haven't been on dating apps for a long time. So if I feel like interest or connection with someone, then I'm more likely to just kind of like see, is this something that could go further, or are we just going to be friends, or, you know, like versus if I'm on a dating app, I go out on a date with this guy, no spark, okay, we'll just get back on, see if the next guy has a spark, if the next, like that's kind of something that I think can come from dating apps. I don't know. Yeah.
a lot of people are looking for that instant connection, because like the app is kind of how it's designed, and everything is like when you match, you're like a match, like when you're messaging, you're doing this, like it's all like very positive. This is just like Hinge's, even like their like tagline for their app is like it's designed to be deleted or whatever.
Yeah, and it's fully not designed to be deleted. Like it's designed to keep you on there and paying money. Like that's just a marketing tool. The apps are not designed to actually facilitate people finding love. The apps are designed for those tech companies to make money. And I think people need to approach it with that in mind. It doesn't mean that using the apps is invalid and that there's no utility to them, but that is what should inform how you use the apps, not the tagline designed to be deleted, because that's just a tagline to them. At the end of the day, how much money have you paid to be on Hinge? How much money have they made off you? That's what it's designed for.
Yeah.
So even though I talk a lot about dating and like human connection, I'm interested in these concepts, in my real life I don't feel like I'm like centering or prioritizing dating. So for me, it's like a secondary thing in my day-to-day experience or in the way that I have fun and live my life, you know. So if I do connect with someone in a way that's like, you know, because I think there's like levels to this, to the sorts of like initial interaction that you have with someone. Sometimes it's like, oh, hi, neutral. It's like, ew, I hate you. Other times it's like, oh yeah, cool, you're interesting, blah, blah, blah. We'll see what happens here. And then it's like, oh, okay, you're like, I'm like attracted to you more than, or I feel a pull towards someone more than like a random nobody, you know? So I think that's kind of like not what I look for, but what I will notice, because I'm not using like an app to facilitate that kind of connection. It's like I'll notice it more with someone and then see like where it goes from there. And I'm more open to the idea of something developing over time, but in like a non-intentional way, if that makes sense. So like,
because you're just meeting them as a person.
Yeah, like I meet someone as a person and like maybe 6 months down the line, I see them again. And then it's like, oh, that's kind of how a lot of my dating experiences have happened. Like I've met someone and then way later it's turned into something. Not like I've met someone and then like we go on a date and then we hook up and then it's like, oh, I mean, that's happened too, but it's also like I met someone and then maybe we follow each other on Instagram and we occasionally chat and then something else brings us together, and then that's been my experience with dating, and it's how I prefer to explore that, at least at this stage in my life. And I think even when things like don't work out, it's still like more interesting to be like, oh yeah, I met this guy like 6 years ago and then we reconnected somehow and then we like went on a date and we had a good time and then we had a bad time and now we don't talk anymore. But I prefer that kind of experience than like, oh, I met on a dating app. And I don't know, that just doesn't feel as natural to me. So I think that sometimes if people are on dating apps, there is this like expectation for romance with whoever you match with, obviously because you're on a dating app. And then if your expectation is not met, you just like dismiss that kind of like the spark, like the concept of the spark is like a bit, it's so abstract, and everyone's idea of what that spark is different. Do you feel a spark intellectually or like physically? I think it has a lot more to do with like people's physical attraction to someone. I don't agree that it's like you need to have a spark. Like what does that mean? Like, yes, you do need to have a connection or you need to have an interest, but I don't think it has to be like, oh, I didn't want to tear his clothes off on the first date, so I just don't think it's gonna work. You know, I've had like very strong attraction to people that I'm just like fundamentally incompatible with for a long-term relationship. So I think if you don't really like unpack that, it's like difficult, and you don't know your compatibility with someone from the first date in terms of like if you're compatible for a long-term relationship. If you have a spark with someone, yeah, maybe you'll be compatible physically, but what do you want? I don't know if like people really know what they're looking for sometimes.
Usually people find when I ask them what they mean by a spark, like they say it's like just a feeling, like it's fine. It probably is like something else, or like you say, like physical attraction, their personality, like how it appears maybe when you first meet them. That's like the main thing that I'm just like fundamentally disagreeing. And then sometimes they have a spark with me and then I'm just like, well, I've just met you, like and like I'm not discounting them, but like the like energy seems like mismatched.
The spark can just be like a hormonal response. Hormonal response is not always conducive to whatever it is that someone's looking for when they're dating, you know? I think for people that are looking for a long-term and like intentional relationship, I feel like you need to be more open to seeing like all the different facets of a person and your compatibility with them beyond just your physical attraction. Because I think that physical compatibility you can work on if you are interested and invested in each other in other areas. Like if you like each other enough, then you'll want to be able to like become more compatible physically if it's not like a perfect match. But if you're like physically really having a great time, I think it's very difficult to make yourself more compatible in other areas of your life if you want a serious relationship. Because like someone's path for their career, someone else's, like you can't just like change those things to be in a relationship just because you guys have hot sex, you know? But like you could be more compatible in like the path that your lives are going on and what you want long term, and then as a result you can adjust like your sexual relationship, you know? I feel like it doesn't have to be one or the other, but if we're looking at that spectrum, I think the like physical part is easier to work on when you guys already like each other, when you're already like compatible in other ways. You can't like override the path that your lives are on just because you guys have good sex, because you could technically have that with anyone.
Yeah.
In a way. And I've met people or been in situations where I have been really physically attracted to someone and we have had a really great time in that sense, but I also have to just accept that we're not compatible for a relationship, which I'm okay with because it's not really what I'm looking for right now anyway. But it's like, I'm not going to delude myself into thinking that because it was like good in this one category, that like all these other things that fundamentally don't make sense are suddenly going to make sense. If I really wanted a serious relationship with someone, I would look much more closely at those other things, not just like the spark, you know. But I don't want a serious relationship, so I can just like enjoy the spark if that's what I want to do. But I think that for people that are on dating apps and looking for a serious relationship, it's not, I don't know, spend a little bit of the energy that you would be spending on dating apps doing something else, and then see if that can facilitate new connections in a way that's not like it needs to be now. Like, because I think maybe that's also something that comes with dating apps. Well, I just matched with this person. It's so easy. So like, why isn't our in-person relationship easy? But it's very easy to do things on the internet that don't filter into your real life. And I think that's an issue that can come with dating apps and just being online a lot. Like, and also like with texting relationships too. Like, oh, it's so easy to communicate with this person and talk to them over the phone all the time. But then how does that translate into how you deal with each other in real life? You know, it's like a huge gap, but it looks like it's so close. But I think the in-person experience is like, it takes so much more effort and like self-awareness in a way that online things don't. And it's important to find a balance between those two things if you find yourself like disappointed with the online to real life translation, you know. How has your experience with dating apps like changed or evolved, do you think, over time?
I think when I was younger, I was probably that stereotype of guy who would message a lot and like very interested from like, I think like very optimistic. Like I would see their profile, like I'm attracted to them. Maybe they list like one or two interests that are like the same. I'm like, oh my God, this person's made for me. And then, yeah, it probably not really like, even though maybe she's like reciprocating like text wise, it's not working like in person. Now I'm probably like a lot, probably to like a slightly problematic extent, like more hesitant when messaging. I even do very like childish things, like I will not respond like immediately if I haven't met them and don't know them, or even though I've read it and I know what I want to say to them, I'll just like let it sit for like an hour. I feel like that's like a very teenager thing to do.
But I think it's okay if you don't really like know someone, you know. Like if you've only matched with them, I think that's easy to just jump to the online thing. Like it's right in front of you, so why don't you just go for it? But you still want to be able to have like all the other parts of your life in order before you just funnel all your energy into this person that you haven't even met. I think that's something that I try to manage as well, because if I'm not on dating apps, then like having like an interest in someone is like not as common for me. So I'd be like, oh my God, I like this guy, blah, blah, blah. Like, but now that I'm getting older, I'm like, okay, I have like deadlines, I have a life, I have friends. Like I can't just suddenly like veer into that. You know, I try to manage the allocation of energy at the early stages in a healthier way than maybe when I was younger, when it's like, oh my God, like let me just like drop everything. Because that's something that I've always had an issue with, and everyone's going to be different. But I think like, you know, just using a guy as a distraction from like the other responsibilities that I have that, you know, I know are going to serve me much more in the long term, but it's much easier for me to just like fuck all that off and flirt for now.
Yeah. I think some of it is also like me not wanting to like appear as someone who does that. Because I guess my goal is to not be that person. Like you're describing like yourself in the past. Even though I still can be. It's not like I've completely grown out of that like desire. I don't want to appear as that person to like people I don't know well. Like my good friends, they know I'm like, if they message me, I'm one of those people who just replies like quickly. I don't know why, but
Or like, where are you at now in terms of what you're looking for in a relationship? Or do you even know what you're looking for in a relationship?
Yeah, like I think because of the like moving element, it's like me accepting that at this point in my life, like short term or a hookup is just not really beneficial.
Do you know many guys that also feel that way, or?
No, like I think a lot of them, like towards the end of their 20s, like come around to wanting a long
Being
term.
more intentional.
Yeah. Some of them accidentally, some of them purposely. Like one of my friends who was like a huge player, fuckboy, whatever you want to call him, like just, I don't know, randomly ended up in like seeing this girl. Now they've been like dating for like 3 years. And before, like we even talked about it extensively, like he was like, yeah, I'm going to be like, I think I'll probably be like single when I'm like 50, like intentionally. But I don't know, like seems to be working for them.
Okay, so this is another question that I get a lot, or like another thing that I observe in a lot of dating discourse is like, why won't a guy commit to a situationship or relationship that he has with a woman? Or like girls that are like struggling to get a guy to commit, and then when they break up, they see that he's like married and having kids or something. And to me, I feel like maybe it has something to do with the incompatibility in that relationship, but also just like the stage of life that somebody is in. Like if a guy is like not thinking about commitment, he's not thinking about commitment with anyone. And when he might start thinking about commitment the day after you break up, and that's just like his
Yep.
journey. And it's not a woman's fault that a guy won't commit. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
I feel like in that situation, you just need to be like very blunt with them. Like, you need to tell them what you're looking for and get a yes or no answer out of them, because usually it'll be like a very slimy, like maybe, or like I like it like this.
But if it's
now.
maybe, then it's no.
Yeah.
You know, I think if it's, because I think if a guy really wanted to commit to a girl, then he would make that clear. You know, I feel like most dudes, it's like,
Yeah, culturally they will.
if you,
they'll be the one to commit. So like if that's not happening and you feel really strongly about them, then you need to pin them down to a yes or no.
if what you really want is commitment out of a guy, it's like you don't even really need to question it.
Yeah, and like you say, you can't make them say yes or like do anything to convince them to say yes. But I think a lot of people have that where they like, I don't know, a past relationship or something, and they see they get married, and there's like this kind of feeling of reflection on maybe your relationship with them and yourself. Don't know.
Have you had that happen where you've like broken up with someone and then they've like gotten into a serious thing that you wanted with them? Or
Yeah, like the first girl I talked to, even though we didn't date, like she's like married to like or engaged to like a dentist now, and they have like a nice house and smiling all their photos and stuff. So, or even like this is like a stranger one, like someone I didn't like. She was my housemate, and we were like good friends. And I think she maybe like liked me for a little while, and I know fundamentally.
did you like her?
Not really, but I know she's like fundamentally like I guess a good person and someone I like gonna get on well with. And then she had like her birthday like recently, because everyone's turning 30 in my life, so everyone's having birthdays like that. And like her and her like new boyfriend were just like standing together, and I just like noticed I felt just like a bit, I don't know if it was jealousy, like just a bit of like regret. It's not even like if she wasn't with him I would go date her immediately. It's just like maybe I'm jealous of like their situation, I don't know. But I'm not really I don't really want their situation. I think it's just seeing someone that I respect and I'm friends with like happy in a relationship somehow made me feel like envious. I suspect that she did like me, so then I'm like, oh, but that could have been me, so
But that also doesn't mean that it has to be you, I think.
no, it wasn't
know?
like a lasting feeling, but I did notice it like as a thing. I was like, oh, this is interesting. I'm feeling this way.
That's good though, that you're able to have awareness over that feeling rather than be like, that bitch.
I think a lot of my like awareness of feelings has come from going to a psychologist and like unpacking lots of stuff that's happened, and then when I'm like feeling certain things, whereas before like sometimes I'd have feelings that like really strong, like really jealous or really upset at like something like relationship related, but it just felt like that strong feeling, like you don't know, you're not even thinking about why you're feeling this, or what are like some other factors that are going on in your life that maybe make this feel like worse than it does. So I think that's helped. Like maybe like years ago I would have felt a lot more shit that day, just because it just would have been something that
You wouldn't been able to bring that awareness around it. You would have just been like, oh, I feel shit. And it's because of this. And then blah, blah, like, but you're like, oh, okay, I'm just having this feeling and I don't have to assign more meaning to it than it requires. Yeah. Okay, we can talk about like your experience with therapy though, like, because I think that's something that men are generally like more hesitant to pursue, having like a third person help them with
Mm.
how they see themselves, how they see their relationships. Could you share with us like your journey to therapy, or like your experience with it, or like how it's benefited you, and anything that you would say to like people in general, but maybe especially dudes that are like looking into it or hesitant about it, or I don't know, just your take.
Yeah, I think I've known I've had like depression and anxiety for a while after a lot of reading and then like medication and whatever. The same friend who was a fuckboy and now is in a relationship, his last girlfriend, her dad and her mum were both psychologists. I think like she also had a lot of like secondhand perspective from them, and like their solution to the problem was like, yeah, like medication, whatever, like will dull it, but like the only solution that's been proven is therapy, in their opinion, anyway. And I think as I read on that, I just basically became convinced that was like the way forward. I tend to trust people that are like good in their field, that they can like help with that.
So you'd previously been prescribed medication
Yeah.
and like gone on medication, but then it hasn't really given, or you didn't really experience that many benefits from it, or
No, like it helped. But I guess like not to be anti-medication or anything, but I was like, am I taking this for the rest of my life? Like you gain resistance to it, and like are there other issues, like other problems that this can't fix? And a lot of people are talking like it's not really a solved problem. It's not like a broken leg. I think like the consensus generally is that you need therapy and maybe medication. Very like uncommon.
not medication and maybe therapy.
Yeah. I think with our generation as well, like I think the conversation changed a lot. People were a lot more open about it, just talking about it. I had to change, not had to, but like I've gone through like several psychologists to find one that like suited me really well.
How did you kind of decide that this was the right psychologist for you?
Some of them would just give really like bad advice. My first one was like quite alternative and wrote like this weird thesis about like happiness, and like it's like generally good concepts but to like a maniacal like extent, and it was like a 60 page about things
Too woo woo for you. Have they all been men, the psychologists that you've had?
No, he was the last one. Since then it's only been women. I'm not sure why that is. Like
Yeah.
maybe it is because like I find it comforting that, especially if I'm having like relationship issues and stuff, even though they're acting impartial as a psychologist, it's like a woman giving me advice versus another guy. There's something about that dynamic that
You feel safer in.
like, or I just kind of I usually take their advice like more often in that particular situation.
Can you give an example of something that you've gone to a therapist with, and then how they've given you perspective?
Someone that was like, oh, they still are like a very close. They're like in my immediate family. They like attempted suicide. They didn't die, but and I think combined with work stress and like other things that were going on, that was just like the tipping point for me. Like I was like, I have to go get like professional help like now. Like not that I was thinking of like doing anything, but I was just like, I just feel so overwhelmed.
So that was like the moment that, or that was the catalyst for you seeking a psychologist.
Yeah, that was when I was like, okay, like, and I was a little bit older at that stage. I was maybe like 25, 26. I was like, this is something I'm gonna have to like work through. It's not gonna just.
I can't just be like, I'm fine.
Yeah. Or I wasn't getting great benefit in talking to my family about it because I was really more the one that they were like looking for support.
For emotional support.
So I guess like pivoted to understanding the emotions I was having and kind of trying to separate yourself from like other people's actions and trying to not feel like responsible for them, and kind of separating yourself from others. And I think after I worked through that, then I was like, oh, this is just like a good like thing to just continue doing.
How often do you go now?
Like once a month.
For your current psychologist, what are the things that you like noticed in your relationship with them that seemed more compatible than previous psychologists?
Being able to like joke around with them, or like having some like small amount of like chemistry is not the right word because it's usually used in like a romantic context, but like I feel like that kind of disarms you a little bit, and it's easier to open up to someone that like you do that with. If I've talked about like an issue like several times in the past, kind of not like forgetting things, or like they haven't written down like stuff from like last time, or just like they're not really up to date on my life, I guess. I could just feel very like disconnected from them. And it is a bit of like a weird situation because you're kind of talking to someone on like quite a personal level, but also you're paying them to do like a service, so it's a job. At least giving the impression of just knowing like what is happening in my life and like where I'm like up to since the last time I've seen. I just tried my best to tell them like exactly what I was thinking. Like how can they help? If you're lying or saying different things or not bringing up like the actual things that are troubling you. I guess another thing was like sometimes in therapy, the conversation can trend towards just a lot of you venting. And like venting is good, but I guess for me personally, I'd rather be like working towards something or like unpacking something else or having something where I feel like, oh, like I've learned this or like I understand this thing better, rather than you just kind of complaining for like an hour. I think you just need to like believe like the advice you're given and believe that like you can improve yourself and you can do these things. Like there's all these different methods to like understanding trauma or whatever like your issue is, but I think like believing in it is like the main thing, because it doesn't matter what they're teaching or explaining to you if you don't believe the solutions they're giving
That
you.
there's like a way forward.
Yeah, then like it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter
Yeah.
what it is. I think that's why you see some people like who are into like really alternative stuff and like it works for them, or even because they believe in it and their mind state changes.
Okay, and then another question I got was, why do you think open and honest communication is so hard for a lot of men? Any thoughts? I don't think it's a gender exclusive thing, to be honest. I just think it's easier to notice in men than it is women.
I mean, it is hard to tell the truth, especially if the truth, if your like insight is like the person won't like me saying this.
Yeah, like fear of rejection or like fear of being the bad guy.
It seems like men in general have like a habit of just like kind of smoothing things over, not really like actually solving it, especially when they're in that stage where they just want to date a lot of people or whatever. Like it's just kind of about like spinning plates. One piece of like advice I've received like fairly commonly, and it does actually weirdly work, but I don't think it's like related to the advice, is like maybe especially as like someone like me who is going to like become more emotionally attached like earlier. My friend was like, you should try and date as many girls as you can at the same time. You will not like hyper focus on any of them. So like you will kind of give them a more measured amount of attention. Obviously you can characterize that behavior in like a different way. Like it's not just for that reason. But I guess like in a lot of circumstances it's like they don't want to tell you what they honestly like think. Like if their goal is to hook up with as many girls as they can, they don't want to tell you that that's what their goal is, because like that's going to inhibit that, right? And then also like culturally that's like, especially as like a younger male, that's like epitomized. Like, you're cool, you're successful, you're very desirable if you're doing that. You don't really get like slut shamed as a guy.
Great point. For you, if you're like dating multiple girls at a time, how do you characterize that? Like everyone's like concept of dating is very different, because some people it's like, oh, I'm dating around, like I'm just going on dates. How do you personally characterize that? Like you're being physically intimate as well, or you're just like dating?
It'd be like intimate with
dates.
like maybe two people, and then maybe talking to several at like its peak, I guess. Fairly quickly the conversation does come up like, oh, are you dating other people? And I just try to be honest in that like moment. Before that point happens, I would have already kind of decided I want to prolong it with this person, and I'm going to like stop talking to these other people, or at least like wean off contact with them.
How is that received from the people that you've had that conversation with, if you're like saying you're seeing other people?
Usually better if like their answer's the same. I mean, it's never been super bad, because I think like if they're asking the question, they're kind of like that means they're either suspecting I am or they want to know if I am. Yeah, never badly. And I think like usually when they've asked, I've actually not been like seeing, like there's been people who have like been kind of messaging and there's been like history, but I don't really classify that as like seeing. Yeah, generally like fine.
And then does that lead to you being like, to the person that you want to be more serious with, are you like, we can? How do you go from seeing multiple people to exclusive?
Because I already find it hard to like text multiple people at once that are like, I find it hard to keep track of like what I've said to this person, what I've said to this person. So like if I'm like generally positive on this person and they've kind of asking like they want a bit more exclusivity. I'm not People are very vague when talking about this stuff. I'm happy to just like stop seeing the other people and just see them and see where it goes. And then if it doesn't go somewhere, then move, see if the people that I've stopped talking to are still interested.
Yeah.
Usually not. But
Hey, what are the things that like attract you to the people that you've wanted to pursue? Do you think, is there like a pattern? Or
before I had a pretty bad, like it was like not a healthy attraction to people who you could characterize them as like independent, but like really they were more kind of like manipulative is like a strong word, but like in terms of how they'll see you and like communicate, very like hot and cold, like measured. And I guess at the time that felt like a lot more exciting when it's like, oh, I like this person, and then now they're like,
Unpredictable.
yeah. I'm like, oh, she's so independent, blah blah blah. Like she's doing her own thing, but then also like her attention feels like more valuable than someone who's very available to talk to. But I think that was it's not the type of person who like I think suits me. No, I don't. Yeah, I don't know. I'm like kind of more attracted to like more recently, like people who just seem very outwardly nice. You know how like they're kind of like I don't know how to describe it, but just like very generous, like smiley, happy people, which is kind of the opposite from like what I used to be attracted to. Definitely like being able to
As well.
talk to them like um more deeply on stuff, or like if they're really passionate about interests, like it's easier to talk to someone when they know a lot about something or they're really invested in something. Probably more jokey than like serious.
Do you prefer to initiate breakups, or do you prefer to be broken up with? Or do you historically initiate breakups?
It's gone
or broken
better
up
for
with?
me when I've initiated it. I've felt better than being broken up with. Yeah, that's what I'd prefer. Like some of my friends are like, oh, I hope you're okay, blah blah blah, and I had to kind of lie and be like, yeah, I'm like sad, blah blah blah, but I just kind of felt like fine. Like eventually I did kind of feel like maybe a little bit. I felt bad for them, but it wasn't like.
What are the things that have led to breakups for you?
So we talked about that most recent one, which was like the pregnancy chat. Sometimes just after seeing someone for like a while and kind of realizing we don't have like much to like talk about, like after you kind of like talked about like all the basic stuff and like you have like your small talk when like out or whatever. I don't know, it's like a different like kind of level of communication that never like develops, or they don't have thoughts and like or opinions on things that I have opinions on. So it's like kind of just seems like unbalanced.
You're just there.
Mm.
Have you ever like cheated on someone that you're dating or been cheated on?
No, I don't think so.
What do you think about people that cheat?
I don't really think there's like ever really a good excuse like for it. Like I feel like the kind of heat in the moment or like I was drunk, like excuse is just like you still knew what you were doing, especially drunk. Like I feel like I've been like very drunk, but I still know like who this person is in front of me, and
Yeah.
the things people claim to do, like oh I was drunk. It's like it must be insane, or they're just not really thinking like much at all. Like
Yeah. Like, what does that say about who they are if it's like that easy to just
yeah, or guys like
sway them?
punch other people like randoms when they're drunk. They're like, "Oh, I was drunk." What do you mean? Like you hit someone in the head? Like you knew you were doing like. I guess like I'm probably more not supportive of it, but like if they're in like a toxic relationship and this is their way of like exiting it.
You can see why, they need to do these like roundabout things
Yeah.
to make it.
But I would probably
Yeah.
just like you could even just text them, just be like, yeah. Like in the bluntest, like shittiest way possible. Just be like, we're not dating each other anymore. Then go hook up with a guy or girl.
If you had an opportunity to get back with an ex or anyone that you've like dated, would you take it?
No, probably not.
Yeah.
I don't really think there's any coming back. Like once, especially if they've broken up with you. Like I've seen that with some of my friends, and I think kind of probably permanently leaves some weird imbalance. And then how do you resolve that?
Like your guy friend's gotten back together with a girl that's broken up with them. Has it worked out? Like, are they any of those relationships like ongoing?
Yeah, well, one of them is the one that had kids, so
Oh.
they yeah. I personally, I think like I overthink compared to most people, so I think I'd always be somewhat aware of it.
Questioning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am jealous of people who just can generally just not think, like not think too much about anything, because I feel like their lives are just so much more stress-free and probably easier.
What kind of advice would you like give your younger self or like to other dudes, just based on your life experience so far?
Kind of what you said earlier about just if whether it's a relationship or like job related or anything, like just going for it, especially while you're young. The risk is like not very high. Like what's the worst that can happen with a lot of these things? Unless you're taking on like a huge amount of financial debt or something to do something. But even then, while you're young is like the best time to do these things. Yeah, I think generally being honest, especially in like dating, like will help. If that's how you feel, like that will get you quicker to the answer you want.
What were the things that were hard for you to be honest about, and like how have you maybe resolved, or like what have you learnt from?
I think just staying in some relationships for like a longer
Longer than
period,
you needed to.
longer than I needed to, and probably, and like something I felt guilty about, and kind of like led to me being like a bit hesitant in dating afterwards, is like I felt terrible about them feeling like shit when it ended, and I made it last a lot longer than it needed to.
Yeah, very important for men to realize that you should not waste a woman's time. Do you think that's something that's like, I wouldn't say, I don't know if like common or something that maybe you observed in yourself? It's like the desire to, like you said, not feel guilty about hurting someone's feelings, but then kind of like dragging something out longer than it needed to, and that kind of like being the same thing.
Yeah, I think I was basically avoiding the first thing because I was like, I know this how this will feel. It'll feel terrible, so I'll just procrastinate and not.
And not just terrible for them, but also terrible for you because you've made them feel terrible, and then it's like this
Terrible cycle. Yeah.
yeah.
I guess like conversely, like in work, there's probably a period where like I was past that stage. I was being like, I think, honest like sooner in general. I don't think it always serves you in work to be like blunt all the time. Like learning when to hold your tongue is like a really good skill, and that can like.
In work, it's different because the power dynamic is different. Like your boss and you as an employee, or like, you know. But I think in a romantic relationship, if you want it to be somewhat like equitable, then finding a way to navigate like being honest without being like rude is important. Like one of the TikToks that I made that went viral was like being okay with not knowing and communicating that to someone instead of thinking you have to give them like an answer and that answer being a lie. That's worse than just saying like, I'm actually not sure how I feel right now, and you know, you deserve like space to do whatever you want, whatever, while I'm figuring this out, or I'm going to try my best to like communicate with you. It's just, I think that's like a really difficult thing for people of any gender to do, but I think it's very difficult. Actually, like I've had all different kinds of responses on that video. It's like men and women saying like, yeah, my partner didn't tell me and then pretended and then blah blah blah. That was worse than if they were just able to say like, I don't know.
Yeah, because if the other person
and I'm trying
needs certainty, then at least you're telling them I can't give you like certainty either way, which is the answer.
Yeah, because so much in life is actually uncertain, and I guess it is a human desire to seek an answer and be able to just like categorize it nicely and then move on with your day. And I think also the internet, you know, the plethora of information available to us, it's like, oh, let me just search and then get an answer. But sometimes you don't know.
Yeah.
You know, it's so different on like an actual human level. Like there's so many different things that people need to sift through, and then like time and your experience will also help to inform you in terms of like figuring that out. It's not so instant like, oh, I just know now. Like maybe 3 months have to pass until that answer is like fully written out.
If you ask them bluntly and you're getting like a ambiguous answer, then you need to just move on. Like just cut them off. And that's the advice that guys are given like really often is like, if there's a girl that you're heartbroken about, or like she's not reciprocating, you need to like cut her off and like move on.
Or she's leading you on.
Yeah. Maybe she just wants to be friends, and she generally does want that. But if you want to pursue her, you're not getting the feedback you want, then you need to just move on. And that can sometimes be the wrong advice, because maybe she would actually be a great friend or whatever. But like generally,
yeah, if your feelings are going to like get in the way of it being a neutral friendship, then I think it's not fair to. So do you have like many female friends? Do you think that, what's your opinion on like men and women being friends?
I see why some people like they can never be friends because of that tension, but I've not found that personally. There's some girls that I just am friends with. There's no romantic like tension. I think it's very like valuable for both sides to get that perspective. I think it's very easy for like someone like me to basically only have male friends as well because of work and even high school. People from there, just like you can pretty easily basically end up with just guy friends, and then maybe you know some of their girlfriends.
I have a friend that mentioned that she doesn't really have any guy friends, and all the guys that she knows are just partners of her girlfriends. So I think it can go both ways.
I think it could be hard for a girl as well to specifically look for guy friends, because so many guys are just like, they take any indication, and I was like this, any like drop of attention means like she likes me, like golden retriever, just like eternal optimism. But
I think everyone's like level of closeness that they can manage with the gender of people that they would potentially date is like different. You know, like some people, they can manage like a more emotionally close relationship with someone that they're not romantically involved with, and then other people not so much. And it's trying to gauge like what works for you and your friendships and relationships.
Some guys just won't be very capable, or people in general won't be like
Yeah.
capable of it if they're potentially
Yeah,
attracted.
I don't think there's anything wrong with like friends to lovers arc. I think in many ways like that makes more sense to know someone in a platonic way and then for it to develop romantically. But I think yeah, it's difficult because I think for me, I don't expect romance from men like off the bat, and I think that I think I'm able to like create safe emotional spaces for people that they're not used to in other relationships, which then creates like ambiguous or like they then interpret it as romantic intimacy. Like at least that's something that I notice for me. It's like I don't question that environment that I might create for other people because it's like who I am. You know, I do that for everyone. I can do it for a random that I just met at a party. I can do it for someone that I really care about, but maybe for other people, well, I didn't realize that for other people, it might be like, I've never had someone ask me this question. I've never spoken about this to someone before, but they've said it to me, and therefore it means that we're like destined to be together. But I'm like, sorry, I just was asking you a question. Like, you know,
They're probably just lacking that kind of closeness with like anyone else, and it's like it seems very unusual.
Yeah.
Or maybe they only had it with girlfriends in the past, and yeah, I can relate though from like my past. Like, yeah.
Yeah, and I think just because people are able to like speak in that way to each other doesn't mean that they have to be together.
No.
But I guess like everyone has a different understanding of that kind of dynamic at different stages in their life. And then final question, what is your star sign or personality type? These are the final two questions, sorry. Firstly, please reveal your star sign and your personality type if you know them.
Aries, the Myers-Briggs one, the personality type. INFP, T, turbulent.
Okay. Not yet A, whatever the A stands for.
Yeah, not turbulent.
Okay, and then based on what you know about me, based off this 2.5 hour conversation that we've had, which is, oh yeah, for context, Christopher and I have never met. This is our first like proper conversation because he pitched himself for Boy Confessions, which I appreciate. So based off my online persona, I guess, that you've been exposed to, and this conversation, what kind of relationship or man do you think I am prone to dating, or do you think would be best for me? And it's not like I actually have to like take this advice from you. It's just like for episode research purposes.
I've listened to only one episode of your podcast that was with your ex-boyfriend.
The guy that I dated
Yeah,
before.
because I just thought that was like an interesting like pitch. I've never seen someone like interview someone, and like after hearing him talk, I was like, oh, this makes sense to me that she would date a guy like this. Like, like in the past, like just how he talks and like who he is. Like I kind of feel like you like that was past me maybe, but that made sense.
I was very young
Okay.
when I dated him. Like I would never date him now, but like obviously I did briefly.
But it was a good episode. It was good to watch.
I would love to know your thoughts on his opinion though. Like the things that he said as a guy, like listening to him.
He's like, to me, like he's kind of like internalized, like not old, but like pickup guy stuff. And then he's kind of like blended it with like the modern interpretation of it / make it like palatable for girls to hear these like opinions. But I'm being honest.
Well, he literally opened with, I've just reread the game and I think it's got value. I was like,
yeah, it's like in a
bye.
very, it reminds me a lot of like tech bros and like Silicon Valley, like kind of like recontextualizing stuff. He's aware he could be cancelled for saying like certain things, and like but he can still like kind of present those opinions with like, oh, but I do this and this. It's kind of like the guy who's like, I have black friends, so I'm not racist. Like that kind of, that's how it felt.
He's woke washed pickup culture.
Yeah, I believe in like a lot of the values of, I guess, wokeness, like the core values, but the whole like formative, I do this, I believe in this, blah, 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 like where it gets to just this kind of saying like, I represent like this. I don't know how to describe it. I'm describing it very poorly, but like they don't believe in these things. They're kind of just espousing them as like things to do. If that makes sense.
Yeah, or their behavior is like contrary to the
Mm,
things that they say that they care about.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, you care about like wanting to be in a relationship, then you dismiss any girl that indicates that she might want something serious too early on, or like who doesn't seem sexually compatible with you, when that's not really the core of what a committed relationship is.
mm.
You know, and then like I don't care about like the game, but like I'm still using
Yeah, like
techniques from it.
yeah. I feel like he would like call himself like a feminist, but then also say like the game's actually got value. It's like they kind of like contradict each other.
Who do you think? What kind of guy do you think would be best?
I think I
suited for you?
contrast from that type of guy. Like I could see like a maybe more of like a golden retriever type guy, like a simple guy. You know, like what's in his mind at all times because he's not thinking like that. You know, he's not scheming. Big muscles. Maybe he has like a farm or something. I don't know. And you have complete certainty because like he's not thinking on the level that it's not like he's dumb, but it's like he's very transparent.
He can leave the scheming to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much for your time, Christopher. We
Thanks.
appreciate it a lot. I hope that this was a somewhat enjoyable experience for you.
That was good. It was interesting. It's part of my like 30-year-old reflection.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Boy Confessions. Please let me know what you thought. And if you have any other like questions, comments, etc. for future episodes, you can follow me on Instagram, TikTok, Spotify, SoundCloud at Amber Akilla, the meme page for this podcast at friend.crush. Sign up for the newsletter so you can get updates, become a subscriber so you can get access to exclusive voice memo episodes. And you can buy merch on the website, friendcrush.club. Thank you so much for your support. And yeah, let me know what you thought of this episode. Stay safe out there. Drink lots of water. Tell your friends and family that you love them. Stay hot and having fun, obviously. Love you so much. Speak soon. Bye.